What is up, everybody? Welcome into another live edition of the Pack-A-Day podcast, a live Q&A edition. Day 3 is done. The draft is done. Christmas is over. Everything is done, and it just feels crazy. It goes so fast every single year. You get through round 1, you're like, oh, man, round 2 and 3 are up. You get through round 2 and 3, you're like, oh, yeah, but there's 4 rounds left, and all of a sudden the draft is over, and you're on to undrafted free agents, and now the hard part. I need going through all of these prospects. I should probably not have my own YouTube on in the background. Go through all of these prospects and deep dive everyone. So I'm going to be doing that obviously a lot over the next couple days, couple weeks, etc. There's going to be a new prospect up with a deep dive every single day starting on Monday. So super pumped for that. But before I get into some of the questions, let me just say, I love this draft from Gute. I absolutely love this draft from Gute. And that doesn't mean anything. We have no idea how this draft is ultimately going to turn out. We're going to get to unwrap some of the presents as we go through the deep dives with the film. We're going to get to do more as we get to rookie mini camps and then OTAs and training camp. But as we all know, it's going to take 3-4 years to ultimately figure out what Green Bay has in these draft picks. And it's going to be fun to diagnose everything. But at the same time, you enjoy it a lot more in the moment and in the process when they're taking players that have a ton of upside, when you can tell that Brian Gutekunst had a legitimate plan going into this draft. As always, he's going to take that home run swing with a high-level prospect on day 1. He did that with Lucas Van Ness. They need premium players at premium positions, and Lucas Van Ness gives them an opportunity to have that. And then it was all about surrounding Jordan Love with weapons. They get 3 wide receivers, they get 2 tight ends, they get a running back, and they give Jordan Love a lot of different flavors at those positions. You know, you're going to get your move tight end, you're going to get your wide tight end, you're going to get a power running back, more of like an overall running back in Lou Nichols. But you get obviously 3 very different wide receivers. All 3 are going to be able to come in and compete right away with the Samori Touris of the world for the number 3, 4, 5, 6 wide receiver spots. So I think this is a very fun draft class. I thought they attacked the positions that were deep in tight end. They get 2 of them very early on day 2 of the draft. I thought they got some really fun wide receivers late. There were some good wide receivers late in this draft. They attacked that position. Then they attacked the premium position early. It was going to be a lot tougher to get edge on day 2 and 3 in this draft. They made sure they got it at pick 13, and they stayed away from some of the bad positions, including safety. Yes, they took Anthony Johnson, who I really like, in the 7th round, but they kind of stayed away from it up until that point because it's just a bad position in the draft. You don't take one just to check a box and just for the sake of taking one. You follow your board, you take as much talent as possible, and you kind of figure out the rest later. So really like how, Gute maneuvered this draft and like how he attacked it and had a plan for everything. And I don't have much to nitpick. If it were me, like the kicker is going to be a wait and see. Who knows, right? Like I'm not going to break down a bunch of tape on a kicker. Just is what it is. They took a kicker. We'll see if he can kick at Lambeau, and the rest is going to be history, whether he can or can't. And then as far as Sean Clifford go, I know there was a question, so I can just kind of go over that one in just a second here. Kevin asked this: any idea what the Packers saw in Sean Clifford that it appears no one else did? So here's the thing at this point in the draft, right? It's the 5th round. You just had a run on quarterbacks. What you're looking for is something, anything that you can sink your teeth into that you think you could potentially develop. With Sean Clifford, there's a couple things. He has kind of some of the intangible stuff. He's an extremely good athlete, like a 4.6 40. So he's good with his legs. He can get out of the pocket. He can maneuver. All right. He was a extremely high thought of recruit coming out of high school. He played at Penn State. He had a lot of productivity, team captain throughout high school, team captain at Penn State 2 times. And he's got the leadership traits. He's got the mobility. He's got all of that. Now, he wasn't a very good quarterback. That's a problem. That's what, you would ideally like a good quarterback. But there's a couple things there that you can ultimately sink your teeth into: the leadership traits, the mobility, and again, the productivity that he had at a big time school at Penn State. And again, was a high level recruit coming out of high school. So you kind of put those things together and you say, all right, well, what does he need to work on? He's got a good arm. There's no question about that either. So like he needs to work on his decision-making. He needs to work on his accuracy. All right. So what you're hoping is maybe you saw something on tape where you saw, all right, if we could fix a little mechanical tweak, we think that accuracy goes up 5% as he starts going on. Like we think we can improve his accuracy a little bit. We think we can fix that. And then, maybe you look at something like decision-making, you say, well, we looked at it further on tape. And I don't know if this is the case, but you look at it on tape and you're like, maybe like, you know what, we can see what he was thinking here. If we can just kind of change this one thing as he's kind of going through his progressions, maybe we can kind of fix that too a little bit. but he's got some of those things that you can't teach. Again, the athleticism and the leadership mentality, and he's got some good toughness too. He kind of plays through things. So when you get to that point in the draft, especially at a quarterback position, which was a position of need at that point, they just had a big run on quarterbacks. You're looking for something, and the odds are it's probably not going to turn out great. But you know what? I will say this. A couple things, and we might, I'm a big Tim Boyle guy, of course, but like, look at Tim Boyle in college, right? By the way, Tim Boyle's what, in like year 7 or 8 at this point in the league, and he's made starts in the NFL. That guy had the worst college line you could ever possibly see. Like, just beyond awful. Like, might have been literally the worst college quarterback of all time. That's no disrespect to Tim, but like, his stats were just awful. But they brought him into Green Bay. He came in, he had a big arm, he competed, and you know what? And I'm not saying he turned into like, a real starting caliber quarterback, but he made it like 7-8 years in this league now. He's now still quarterback with the Jets. And look at Matt Flynn, 7th round pick. That guy did, like, if you compare Sean Clifford to Matt Flynn, like, it's basically like identical. Like, you see some ups and downs, you see some leadership traits, but it's just like, if you could get a decent backup quarterback out of Sean Clifford, we'll see what ultimately happens. He's going to have the opportunity to compete for it in camp. Right now they got Danny Etling. We'll see if maybe they bring in a veteran. But the other thing I'll say really quick here about Sean Clifford, and by the way, like, I do think Sean Clifford, if you're going to nitpick things, I think Clifford and maybe the kicker are the ones that you're probably nitpicking a little bit more. And if those are the ones that you're nitpicking, again, you're probably in a very good spot overall. But let's just say they go into the season with Sean Clifford as their backup quarterback, right? You might be immediately thinking, how can you possibly go into a season with Sean Clifford as your backup quarterback? That's like, you're screwed. Yeah, they're screwed. Like, so let's play this out, right? Let's say like everything goes right, and they're like a 10-7 team with Jordan Love at quarterback. Like, a lot of things would probably go right. 10-7 team with Jordan Love as your quarterback. At least that's what it's trending towards. Let's say you're 4-3 and Jordan Love suffers some sort of season-ending injury, right? So what, if you bring in a Joe Flacco or a Matt Ryan, what are you going to do? You're going to middle ground. You're not going to compete for a playoff game or anything like that. You're going to end up 7-10, maybe 8-9. Sean Clifford, you might not win a game the rest of the season. All right, pick in the top 5. Like, that's not so bad. Like, you can figure that rest out from there. Like, at that point, if Jordan's done, like, the season's a lost cause anyway. The big thing this season is to evaluate Jordan. At that point, if things went bad, some big injury to Jordan, you might as well have a Sean Clifford as a backup, lose the rest of your games, and pick in the top 5 of the draft. It's ultimately not that worst case of a scenario when you kind of think of it that way. Obviously, that is a worst case scenario, but you know what I mean. All right. Seems like Goody stepped into the leadership vacuum in several ways. Felt like his presence was a stabilizing force this week. What do you think? Maybe. First of all, really appreciate that, Dylan. That's super kind of you. I get the same vibe from Goody this week that I have really since he stepped on the job. And there's things that Goody's done well. There's things that maybe Goody could have done better. But I feel like he's been kind of the same guy since day one. And I really enjoy listening to Goody speak when he is up at the podium and talking about the draft picks and their philosophy. I like their overarching philosophy of how they attack drafts. They're looking for premium position home run swings in the first round of the draft. After that, they're looking for high-end athletes that they think they can develop and that can become the next stars for their team. They're not hoping for, they clearly want good players, but they're hoping that they can, take home run swings throughout the draft with these high-end athletes. And you're hoping you hit on 2 or 3 of them, whether it's in the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7th round, it doesn't matter. You can hit on a few of those, extreme athletes throughout the course of the draft. You end the draft with a high-end, Pro Bowl caliber player, maybe a couple good starters. You've done a really good job. Doesn't matter where they were selected. So as far as leadership, though, I think he has done a really good job with that throughout this. I think, listen, there with Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback, you can look at it in 2 different ways. On the one hand, you have a lot of job security that a lot of other GMs and coaches do not have. You have Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback, and that is going to get you a lot of playoff games. It's going to get you a lot of wins. That's going to keep you in a pretty cozy spot in your GM and in your head coaching spots, etc. On the flip side, there's a lot of pressure that comes with that. There's a lot of managing Aaron and what he wants the roster to be, what he wants the team to be, what he wants the play calls to be. There's a lot that goes into that. And I do think, and this is not a knock on Aaron, it might come across as a knock to Aaron, but I do think that with Aaron moving on to New York, I think a little bit of that sort of pressure and just expectation and what Aaron wants and those sort of things just kind of go to the side. And there's a different pressure now because they just jettisoned their all-time Hall of Fame amazing quarterback to a different team. And now they don't have that anymore. And the job security isn't the same. So there's a different pressure. But at the same token, I do think it allows Goody to sort of breathe and operate the way that he wants to, Matt LaFleur to sort of breathe and operate the way that he wants to. And I think it's just going to be different. And as I said, when the Aaron Rodgers trade was finally going to go through and Aaron announced that he was going to be a New York Jet, for me personally, it's just kind of like a new chapter that I'm really excited to read. I've kind of read the same chapter for the last 30 seasons and the same book for the last 30 seasons. And it's been the best book you could ever possibly read. It's been beyond amazing. I wouldn't change a thing other than, maybe a couple wins at the end in a couple of the chapters, but it's been the best book that you could possibly imagine reading. But at the same token, I've kind of been reading the same book for 30 years. And for the first time, I'm just excited to read something new. And even though I know that this book that I'm going to read now is probably worse, and it's not going to be quite as good, right now it's just different. And I'm excited to read this book. And I think everyone in sort of the Packers organization is just kind of a little bit of a renewed energy. And there's a youth to this team. And I think it's just kind of fun to be a part of as we're sort of going through it. Like I said, expectations, be careful with them. There could be some real big bumps along the way. But at the same token, it's something different. And I'm kind of excited about it. All right, let's see here. Let's see. What do we got for chats and questions? All right, let's talk about this one. All right, it's a little bit, pessimistic here, Zion, but we draft talent on defense every year and still can't stop the run or slow down the opposing team's offense. Couple things. Defense, very hard. Although last year was a real big switch. Like teams were a lot better last year on defense than in previous years. Defense has caught up a season ago. We'll see how that works in 2023. But for the most part, you're right. You're 1,000% right. The defense has not lived up to expectations. I said last year, you had first-round picks and high-end free agents all across that defense. And it didn't turn out at all. Wasn't good enough. Bottom line, wasn't close to good enough. That was a team that I think we all thought at minimum had the opportunity to be a top 10 defense, and they were anything but a top 10 defense. That's not good enough. And then you have to reconcile, is that evaluation? Did they spend the wrong draft picks and the wrong money on the wrong players? Or is that coaching? Do they have the players and the talent and everything that they need, but the coaches aren't getting enough out of it? I think a lot of people lean on the coaching and Joe Barry. I think there's truth to both, 1,000,000%. I don't think Darnell Savage has certainly lived up to his expectations. Last year, pre-injury, Eric Stokes was not living up to his. Quay and Devontae, slow start in their first-year rookies as first-year rookies. Jair had an up and down season. He played better towards the second half of the season, but first half he was still up and down. I think still getting used to kind of coming off that shoulder injury to some extent. Devondre took a step back in year two. Kenny Clark, I thought was nowhere near peak Kenny Clark that we've seen what he's capable of playing at. Rashawn Gary was having a dynamite beyond awesome season before going down with the injury, and it's unfortunate that he got hurt. But I think you can argue that some of the stuff from what they put money into didn't live up to expectations quite as much. I think on the flip side, you can say, hey, the coaching wasn't good. And I think this year, as I've said all around, Aaron's gone, and we're about to learn a lot about a lot of different people on this team, from Jordan Love at quarterback to Matt LaFleur as a play caller and as an offensive mind, to what can Adam Stenavich do in year two, to Joe Barry on defense, what can Rich Bisaccia do with year two of the special teams, to Goody, to all of it. This is a real true evaluation year in Green Bay. And if somebody doesn't live up to what they are supposed to be doing, if some of the guys that Goody had drafted him, if Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt and some of the other, early draft picks and this draft class do not come out and play well, all right, that's going to be a change. Like, you're going to have to evaluate Goody on what happens. And if this defense, if the players are all looking good, but this defense is still a bottom third of the league defense, I can guarantee you it's Joe Barry's last year in Green Bay. So there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be evaluated this year. And you could tell with Brian in his last press conference, or in his press conference following day one, when they took Lucas Van Ness, the message was clear. The expectations for this defense this year, especially after drafting Van Ness, are very, very high, and they need to meet those expectations. And I think all Packer fans should have that, that same level of desire from their defense, because there's no excuse anymore. There's enough talent on this defense to rule the world and at least be a top 12, 15 defense. Like, if we're being even remotely kind, like you can't be a bottom 10 defense again. You just absolutely cannot. All right. Reed seems to be the obvious favorite to start in the slot. What are the odds Toure and or the other rookies play meaningful snaps this year? So I think here's the fun part, right? I think, first of all, we'll see what Green Bay does if they do ultimately add some sort of veteran wide receiver. Based on Matt LaFleur's comments, he basically said, hey, we had veterans last year. Now it's Romeo and Christian Dobbs' turn to, run this wide receiver room. Just a lot of faith in two young second-year wide receivers. But this is what they should be doing. They should be developing these young players. And that's, you don't want another Sammy Watkins brought in and sniping snaps from all these super talented young wide receivers. That's the worst thing you could do at this point. Let them play. Let them develop with Jordan Love. Let them develop on the same timeline. So I am anti, veteran wide receiver at this point. If you want to, it's weird because I don't think it'll ever happen. But if you wanted to bring a Randall Cobb back as hey, you're going to play 300 snaps this year, and you're just going to kind of be the veteran guy and being that guy that can help everyone else out. I would kind of love that, but I don't think you need to either. Long story short, to kind of answer the questions, I think you have your two top ones, right? In Dobbs and Watson. They're going to go into the season as number 1 and number 2. And then after that, it's going to be a complete competition. And I think clearly Jaden Reed is going to be in that competition, probably in the slot. Here's the crazy thing about Samori Toure. Every time, and I mean every time, that you bring up young wide receivers, or if you bring up Dobbs or Watson to Goody or LaFleur, and I forget it was day 1 or day 2 when Goody was one of his 5 press conferences in this past week. Again, the same thing happened. He was asked about the wide receivers, or was asked about Dobbs and Watson. Every time they unprompted bring up Samori Toure. It's incredible. Samori Toure is at top of mind for both Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst. They bring him up a lot. So I think he is very much in play for a significant role on the team this year. And then as far as the rookies, if the clear top 6 that you're going into the season with are Toure, Dobbs, Watson, and the 3 rookies, right? That's probably your first 6 wide receivers. But number 3 through 6 are completely up for grabs. If somebody's amazing, if any of those guys end up really good, Romeo Dobbs could get bumped to the number 3 spot. That's well within the realm of possibility. And it could be any of those guys stepping up. Maybe Bo Melton can get in the conversation if all of a sudden he has a really nice offseason. But your 6 wide receivers are kind of set in stone. And if anything would happen from an injury standpoint to Dobbs or Watson, both who had injuries a season ago, any of these guys are in play. So yeah, I very much expect all of these guys to be in line for snaps this season. And they should all go into the season as if they could win a lion's share of snaps if they go out and play well. Rocky Mountain, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for all the chats this weekend. The clip you tweeted of the Richardson Jr. punch out was a phenomenal play, late round pick, but good stuff. Assuming health, I think we're competitors. I would pump the brakes a little bit on the second one. Here's the cool, I don't know, maybe cool, not cool, whatever, but the NFC is just bad, right? So who knows what's going to happen in the NFC? It's going to be sort of a free for all, and you're going to see some teams rise to the top. And I think some teams take a fall down. I mean, Philly is stacked. We'll see what happens at quarterback for the 49ers, but they clearly still have a very good team. And then I think after that, you certainly still have some good teams. I think the NFC North is entirely up for grabs. I think you could take the 4 NFC North teams and say any one of them could end up 1 through 4. Literally. I think if you said the Lions ended up anywhere 1 through 4, the Packers, the Bears, the Vikings, I think all of it is possible. So I think that makes for a very fun NFC North. And I think the NFC in large part is like that as well. The NFC South is totally up for grabs. We'll see if, Seattle with Geno Smith can make it to the playoffs again. The Cardinals are going to probably be a really bad team again. Kyler Murray's still coming back from the ACL. The Rams are in a super weird sort of kind of rebuild, but still have Stafford and Kupp and Donald mode, still have McVay. They're in a weird spot. Cowboys should be good, but Commanders. So it's kind of what? Cowboys, Giants, Eagles, you'd expect to be good. And then maybe 49ers, Seahawks-ish. And then somebody wins the North, somebody wins the South. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's maybe your 7 teams. But I don't know. It's not a great conference. And I think it's totally up for grabs. But as far as the Richardson Jr. punch out, yeah, going to be a sound special teams player. And right now at safety, by the way, I did not realize, and kudos to Peter Bukowski for shouting it out. I didn't realize that Tariq Carpenter went on the record to say he's moving to linebacker. So that was of non-draft news. That was news to me. So apparently Tariq Carpenter said he is moving to linebacker. So you look at safety, take Dallin Levitt and take that S next to his name for safety and just put a T after it, because he is just a special teams guy. You never want to see him playing safety on the field. He's just a special teams guy. So you've got Rudy Ford, Tavarius Moore, Innis Gaines, and Darnell Savage. That's your four safeties right now. So Anthony Johnson, can he beat out Innis Gaines? Yeah. Could he beat out Tavarius Moore? Yeah. Could he beat out Rudy Ford? Yeah. Could he beat out Darnell Savage? Yeah. Like, he's right there. I don't care what round he was picked in. If you are a living, breathing human safety right now, and you are on the active roster for the Green Bay Packers, you could be you too could be the starting safety of the Green Bay Packers if you have an S next to your name on the Packers roster. Like, that's that up for grabs. So he's a fun player, and I'm excited to see what he can do. Excited to jump into his tape a lot more as well. Appreciate the chat. John, thanks for all your work and analysis. As an ISU fan, I'm excited to see Anthony Johnson Jr. be a Packer. Much like Lazard, he is willing to do the dirty work. Yeah, I think they have a really fun program there, and I think you get some really good prospects from that school. And like I said, I'm excited to really jump into the tape. Excited that you got one of your Iowa State guys. It's always fun when your college players end up on your NFL teams, and you can always root for them even more in those scenarios. So very fun, and excited that we were able to see him get drafted as a member of the Packers. Appreciate the chat. The Badger trio, just have a feeling we might see the offense Matt has always wanted to run. This draft showed that. You think it will run different with Love at quarterback? I do think there is going to be a difference with how this offense is run. How could there not be, right? Like, you don't have a mastermind at the line of scrimmage that has a variety of different cadences and can make a bunch of different checks and audibles. Like, you're probably going to the line with two plays for Jordan Love. Maybe he can some things on certain plays, but like, for the most part, you're probably trying to keep things as kind of simple as possible in his first year, and just seeing like what he can do in those situations and scenarios. You probably want to set up a nice running game with play action. You're going to run some RPO stuff. Like, this is going to be the Matt LaFleur offense that I think he envisions and designs, but he also has to be careful that he's running stuff that Jordan's going to be able to be successful with. So I do think there's going to be a lot of learning curve, but with Jordan and what this offense looks like, I think it's going to take Matt and Jordan time to put together and just kind of feel each other out for what's going to work for both of them. And then it's going to be feeling out all of these weapons too. What is Luke Musgrave and, Tucker Kraft and, Dontavian Wicks and like all of these guys, what do they bring to the table? And obviously Jaden Reed and what type of jump do Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs make in year two? Like, I think those things are all going to take time to sort of figure out. Can Bakhtiari stay healthy the entire season? That would certainly be nice and give you one of the best left tackles in football. Can Josh Myers finally take a jump at center? All those things are questions. Can Jenkins stay healthy at left guard? Because then you have the best left side in football if both of those guys are healthy. Like, all of these things are going to be in play. And I think it's just going to take some time to feel out, but I absolutely feel like we're going to get a different type of vibe and feel from this offense this year. And I think we will see a very different and fresh and new version of this Matt LaFleur offense. Who was my favorite pick of the weekend? Thanks for the chat, by the way. It's a really good question. I think it's probably Musgrave. I think that's probably the one. I really like Carl Brooks. If there's a player that it's no think. As soon as we get done here, the player that I'm excited to throw the tape on for is Carl Brooks, bar none. Like, some of the highlight stuff is just through the roof. I want to watch more of him and throw on the all 22 and just see what he was like. He's a defensive tackle that's lining up at edge, and he's got some edge juice to him. He's going to kick inside, be used as a pass rusher. That's the guy that I'm excited to throw the tape on for. But Luke Musgrave, man, like, there's just so much fun things that Matt LaFleur could be able to do with him if he can hit what I think he's going to be able to hit. I think he can be the best, receiving tight end in this draft. I think he doesn't get quite enough credit for his blocking. That, you see a couple pancakes on tape at Oregon State that he shows what he's capable of. The upside with Musgrave is tremendous. I think the value at early day 2 is amazing. And I think they got, like, I know people were mocking Michael Mayer or Dalton Kincaid at 15 or 13 when the Packers were at either spot in all of the mock drafts. To get Musgrave on day 2 in the second round, early second round of the draft, pick 42, instead of having to spend a premium pick on day 1 for a tight end, I beyond love it. And like I said, he might end, like, he was in the run. He might have been my favorite tight end, like, going into the draft. Like, it was at least in the conversation. So to get him, super, super excited about that. Thanks so much for that chat, Lewis. All right, Ryan, your favorite day 3 pick. Love the vids, Andy. Thanks so much. Really appreciate that, Ryan. I just mentioned Karl Brooks. Like, can't wait to throw him on. Again, we'll see what that ultimately amounts to, but that's the guy that I'm super excited to break down. And as we get into our deep dives on Pack a Day this week, and well, it'll take a while to get there. What, Monday will be Van Ness, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The following Monday will be Karl Brooks. So we got a little time before we get to Karl Brooks, but I can't wait to get there. And I'm super excited to break down all these guys in great detail. But like I said, Karl Brooks is the one can't wait to turn on. Thank you so much for the chat. Kraft will be fighting the Packers' third round curse, but I have a ton of faith in his game. With Musgrave healthy, he could be top 3 in targets. Agree. I agree all the way around. Like I said yesterday, I think I did it in my quick follow-up video. I'm putting it on record, put it in Sharpie. Tucker Kraft is breaking the Packers' third round curse. And probably the really last great third round pick just happened to be a tight end as well. That was Jermichael Finley. So I'm saying that Tucker Kraft is going to break the Packers' third round curse, and they are going to get a real legitimate player in the third round at tight end in Tucker Kraft. And like I said, really excited to what he can bring something different than Musgrave. I think Musgrave could be a big target guy. If you want to know what's super important for Jordan Love, it's having that security blanket, right? Jordan is a first-time starting quarterback, and teams are going to throw the kitchen sink at him. They're going to throw things at him that he has never seen before. They are going to blitz him. They're going to drop 8 or 9 guys in coverage. They're going to do everything they can to make Jordan's life a living hell. And you know what helps in those situations? Everything breaks down. Your line's going to crap. Players are blitzing from everywhere. Your head's going a million miles per hour. Oh, I've got like a 6'7" tight end that can like just go up and get the ball if I need him to. And maybe I'll go in that direction if things break down and I start to panic a little bit. I think that security blanket, while Jordan kind of gets his bearings under him as a first-time starter, I think that is going to pay massive, massive dividends. So super excited for that. All right, Rocky Mountain, thanks again. Oops. I think the Giants last year are a good example for us to aspire to. Some analysts left them for dead, and they surprised everyone. That's a really good point. And I'll say this too, like, do we think that Jordan could have a season like Danny Dimes did a season ago? Yeah, very much so, right? And yeah, I don't know that anyone looked at the Giants roster going into last season and was like, whew, like, man, they added a lot of pieces. They are ready to compete. They got Brian Dable, which I think helped a whole heck of a lot. And I think some of those, like Saquon Barkley, finally got back to being Saquon Barkley, or at least being Saquon Barkley, right? I think Daniel Bellinger was a really nice day 2 pick. You know, some of those wide receivers started to play a little bit better. Their defense played phenomenal at times. Like, you could see that. But I think that's a really fair point. I think this is a team that could follow a similar blueprint. As much as I have been telling you guys, and I believe that this is not a team that's competing for a Super Bowl, this is not your normal rebuild, rip the Band-Aid, holy cow, the Packers are crap, like, franchise. Like that, it's just not that. There's going to be bumps in the road. It's going to be, it's going to be hard. Do I think they could be a playoff team? Yeah. I think if things go well, they could easily be, not easily, they could be a playoff team. I think if things went well. Do I think they could be, somewhere between, do I think they could be like 6-11 too? Yeah, I think they could, depending on how things go. But this is a transition year. It's an evaluation year. And if you get something like that happens and they all of a sudden make a run at the playoffs, that's awesome. That'd be an amazing experience for these guys. I think the one thing that you'd want to be careful with if you're Brian Gutekunst and company is not taking that 1 year. If they all of a sudden do get the 6th seed in the playoffs and maybe lose in the first round by a field goal or something like that, like, take that and be like, look, this team is like ready to take a big jump. Let's go all in again. Like, I don't think you want to do that. I think you still want to take a pause a little bit, but this is still a team that is Jair Alexander and Kenny Clark and David Bakhtiari and Aaron Jones and a bunch of weapons that they just added in the draft, and the all-pro first-team kick returner and Keyshawn Nixon, and some really, really fun players littered throughout this roster, some really high-end players that they drafted and are working to develop, and Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt. TJ Slayton looked like he was ready to take a jump. Like, there are some real... Devondre Campbell was just a first-team all-freaking-pro 2 seasons ago. This is not a barren roster that's like, wow, how did the Packers get to this point? Like, they've got some really young, intriguing talent, and it's just up to Green Bay to put it all together. And obviously a lot of that's going to be on Jordan as well. Grant Avery, does it seem to you like there was a better player available at every position we picked? No, I don't know. Like, that's the cost of doing business in the draft, is like, there's going to be other teams that got really good players. There's going to sometimes be a player that goes off the board right before you. Sometimes there's going to be a player that got taken off the board right after you. I did a chat with Bleacher Report right before here, and somebody asked me, are the Packers going to regret trading their pick down to the Lions or trading down and the Lions get Brian Branch? I don't know, maybe. Like Branch is a really good player, but the Packers weren't going to take him either. Like he doesn't fit their thresholds. He's kind of more of a slot star guy, kind of plays the same type of position that Darnell Savage plays. Like probably wasn't going to be in play for them. You weren't going to take him. And you thought you could get down, get the guy that you wanted, and still pick up additional draft picks. They get Jaden Reed. They pick up some extra draft capital along the way, and we'll see what happens. And your hope is that the guys that you got were the right ones. And you hope that the Lions didn't pick the next great safety, but they were going to pick somebody. And all 32 teams were going to take talent. And that's the hard part. You can't take all 285, whatever many players it was in this draft. Like there's going to be some good players that go to other teams. Of the 13 whatever picks that Green Bay made, guess what? Probably 8 or 9 are not going to turn out. That's just the draft, right? So sometimes there's going to be better players available. Sometimes there's going to be players that end up going to other teams that you wish were Green Bay Packers. That rinse and repeat every draft for the rest of your life. Every draft previously, it just is the name of the game and the cost of doing business when it comes to the draft. But I really like what Green Bay was able to do overall. And overall, like when Luke Musgrave was on the board, I was excited about Musgrave. When Tucker Kraft was on the board, I was excited about Kraft. I didn't make any bones about it. Christian Gonzalez and JSN were the two guys I really liked with the first pick, but I really like Lucas Van Ness too. So I'm not too upset about anything. I really like this draft overall. Nicholas Miles, so many picks this weekend. Do we even have room to add low budget vets to the locker room? That's a no, but more due to salary cap constraints than due to roster constraints. This is still a team that has some holes, right? I still don't believe that they have a true starting safety on the roster. Seems sort of problematic. I know Savage and Rudy Ford or Tavarius Moore will probably start. I don't really view either of those guys as real true starting caliber safeties in the NFL right now. That's kind of a problem. I think they've got enough rotation along the defensive line. I think they got their rotation at edge now. I think linebacker will be just fine. I have no concerns there, especially if Tariq Carpenter's moving to linebacker as well. Good offensive line. They've got some tight ends now, got their running backs. So I see your point, like early on. Like I don't know that there's necessarily like a position outside of safety that you're saying like, we got to go get this guy. I think they could definitely long-term use a couple starting caliber safeties, but I think it's more, if you look at their financials, like they just don't have money to add anyone of substance at this point. They can add a couple of your, maybe Devondre Campbell, Keyshawn Nixon, Rick Wagner type signings, and maybe they hit on a couple of those guys, but not probably too much more than that. All right. What else do we got here? Let's see. All right. Thanks so much for this. Do you think LVN can contribute immediately, or is he more of a project? I think both. I think he absolutely can contribute. He will contribute immediately. I feel very confident in saying that. Like Rashawn Gary's probably not starting the season. I think he's probably going to take a little bit of time. I think Preston and Van Ness are probably your starters week one, at least until Gary's ready to go. And then I think Preston and Gary are your starters and Van Ness is your rotational guy. And I think on obvious passing downs, I think you very much are going to see Preston and Gary with Lucas Van Ness and Kenny Clark coming at you from the middle. I think Lucas Van Ness will move inside and rush from the inside as well. So I think he's absolutely going to contribute immediately. At the same time, he's not a project, but he has a lot more upside that he hasn't even come close to reaching yet. And that's what Green Bay's job is going to be, is to untap that upside, because right now he can be good right away and he could be that same player forever. And it would be like, oh, we got a good player, but he has to unlock his pass rush. Like he's kind of got three things. He's got a long arm that he'll use. He's got a little bit of a push pull. And then he's got, just speed to power. He'll bull rush you, right? Those are three things. You're not seeing much counter. You're not seeing anything that's building off of itself. You're not seeing any nuance to his pass rush. Like it's just kind of like three moves that he kind of goes to kind of every single time. And he's more or less just trying to win with pure athleticism. So that's the type of player that he is right now. It's the same thing that kind of Rashawn Gary had coming out. If you put a pass rush plan together and you all of a sudden become a more nuanced pass rusher and you can add some things to your arsenal and you can set up a player by doing one thing and then coming back and doing something else later, counters to your other moves, now you're unstoppable. Because he's going to win right now with athleticism. He's going to, and I'm not saying every play or anything like that, but he's going to get wins right now in the NFL as a pass rusher just by being Lucas Van Ness. That's just how talented he is, how physical and athletic he is. But now all of a sudden you have a plan. You have, you work on your footwork, your cadence as a rusher, your pass rush technique, your hands, all of those sort of things, your footwork. Now, good luck as a opposing offensive tackle, because you're in for a extremely long day if Lucas Van Ness starts putting some of that stuff together. All right. Thanks so much, Arnaldo. Speaking of holes, which one do you see Green Bay? I don't know. Speaking with holes is an awful way to start a chat, but which one do you see Green Bay filling with undrafted free agents? There's no, I don't know. You don't really fill holes with undrafted free agents. You just go out and get as many talented players as you can possibly get at that point. But I'm sure they'll add some safeties. They didn't draft a single offensive lineman. So I know they already added the guy that they brought in for a visit. His name's going to escape me at a moment, but I know they already brought him in. I know there's like 5, 6, 7, 8 guys that have already been announced at this point, but they're just going to chase talent. They're going to find as many players that are as talented as they can. You get a 90-man roster. Nobody that you're signing as an undrafted free agent are you thinking is going to help you in 2023. It's not to say that 1 or 2 of them might not be able to, but you're not going into it expecting that. You're just trying to get them into camp and seeing if you can give them a puncher's chance at earning a job. So that's all they're trying to attack right now. But I think definitely probably attack offensive linemen, since they didn't draft a single one with any of their picks. All right, Lewis, Andy, please complete the best roster in the NFC North is blank. Oh, I guess, I don't know. I'll probably have to look at them a little bit closer, quite honestly, following the weekend. So much is difficult because Minnesota's on the decline. Chicago's a little bit on the incline, but I'm actually kind of underwhelmed by the offseason, considering they went into it with the first overall pick and $100 million to spend in free agency. I was kind of a lot more worried that they were going to build that out in a lot better way than what they actually did. Now, they accumulated a lot of draft capital. I like some of the things that they did in this draft. Darnell Wright's a really good player, but like what I saw they had in their arsenal for draft picks and money to spend, it could have been a lot worse. And I'm kind of okay with what they've done as a Packer fan. It could have been a lot scarier. I probably would go with the Lions. I'd probably go with the Lions. I think they probably have the best roster, but Jared Goff is a big question mark. But how much longer is Kirk Cousins going to be able to keep going? Like, what's Justin Fields' upside? What's Jordan Love's upside? I'd probably go Detroit, but Green Bay's right there. Chicago's kind of there. Minnesota's kind of there. That's why I say I think all 4 of these NFC North teams could finish anywhere 1 through 4, and literally none of it would surprise me at this point. Appreciate the chat and the question. Jack, longtime listener, love the show. Thoughts on Goody's comments today on Love's option? I didn't check it. I didn't see it actually yet. I did the Bleacher Report show. If somebody wants to chat in and just let me know what the comment was, I can comment on that a little bit more. Sorry that I did not see that, but I don't know. I'm assuming it means that he didn't have an update on it, but let me know and I'll try to answer that a little bit more. I'll come back to that, Jack, if I see it in the chat. Andy, I was introduced to you when Dom Capers' firing happened. Your growth in Packers coverage has been awesome to see. Thank you for your hard work. Really appreciate that. It's a labor of love. I love doing this every single second. Like I don't have a stop time on today's chats. If you guys want to keep asking questions, I'm going to stop at some point. My voice is going to go at some point this weekend, I think, but I just love talking, Packers with you guys. I love talking Packers in general. I love breaking down this stuff. So it's a lot of fun, and it's cool that, we kind of get to do some of this stuff along the way. Basically said it's a lot of money for someone who hasn't played and have until Tuesday to do it. He said they'll make a decision. They'll make a decision until Thursday, excuse me. Goody said they didn't have an answer by Tuesday. They will know, but it's a lot of money. Interesting. That's weird to me, if I'm being honest. My gut reaction is that's weird. That's not a huge vote of confidence. Here's what I would say of it being a lot of money. It's a lot of money. Yes. It's a lot more money if he ends up being good. And yes, you could franchise him, but that ends up being even more money than just picking up the 5th-year option. And here's probably the biggest thing I would say. You just picked up Darnell Savage's 5th-year option. And I know it's like a $12 million difference, but if you were willing to pick up Darnell Savage's option at $8 million, but you're not going to pick up Jordan's at 20, like, to me, it's a risk reward, right? So if he ends up being bad, let's just role play this out, right? If Jordan ends up being bad or even really bad, and you've got a $20 million cap hit on next year with him as your quarterback, it sucks. But guess what? You're kind of screwed anyway. Like, and what happens when he was really bad this year? He was really bad, and what you probably went 3 or 4 wins on the season. Like if he was really bad where you're not going to keep him as your quarterback, you probably won 3 or 4 games, which means you're probably taking a quarterback next year. So that quarterback that you bring in is probably going to be on a very small deal, all things considered. So you keep Jordan for 1 more year and he's on a 20 million. Yeah, it sucks, but you're not competing next year anyway at that point. So it's not the worst deal in the world. And you could still have Jordan be kind of the guy while you bring up your rookie if he's not ready to play right away. So it's not the worst case scenario in the world. If he's good and you plan on making him your starter, well, then you get 1 more year on the 20 mil and you can sort of figure out what kind of extension you want to work from there. And if he's amazing, then the $20 million you're not concerned about that at all. So I don't know. It seems like a very not great vote of confidence for their first time starting quarterback, if I'm being honest. Gives me a little bit of cause for concern, but we'll see. Maybe it's just a financial thing. Maybe they've got a reason. Maybe they're lying. Maybe they're just going to easily pick it up. Who knows? But it's an interesting answer. All right. Let's see here. Why is Luke Musgrave, appreciate this, Kenneth. Why is Luke Musgrave your favorite tight end in the draft? Watch your podcast. He has as many cons as pros about him. Super athletic, but so is Zach Kuntz. There's a different type of athletic for Zach Kuntz. So this is where we always can get into the conversation of testing athletic versus football athletic, right? So Zach Kuntz, 10.0 RAS, went in the 7th round of the Jets, if memory serves. He tested well athletically, no question about it. You watch his tape, a little bit more lumbering to him. It doesn't quite translate as well on tape, in my opinion, as what a Luke Musgraves does. I'm not saying that Luke Musgrave is like all of a sudden going to be this, whatever, like Kyle Pitts-ish tight end where you can basically put him out there and he moves exactly like a wide receiver or anything like that. But his movement skill is really, really good. I think you can put him out wide and use him as a big receiver. I think you can put him in a traditional tight end spot, and I think he can hold up there as well as a blocker as like a Robert Tonyan did, and has a much better receiving chop than a Tonyan did. I love his speed after the catch. Needs to work on his balance. I think he needs to work on his blocking still. There's some things he needs to work on. But when I watch him as a pure receiver, I think I would put just a pure receiver. I would probably put Kincaid a little bit ahead of him as just a natural wide receiver in some of the stuff that he does. But Musgrave is right there. And Musgrave, I think, is faster. And Musgrave is a little bit taller, a little bit more size. So you just kind of look at some of that stuff. You put it together. You watch some of the tape. And I think you see some of the flashes on tape with Musgrave that give you the googly eyes where you're just like, oh, wow, that could be super, super special. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to turn out. He's got a lot of work to do to develop as a player. Tight end is the second hardest position, in my opinion, to develop after quarterback, because there's so much to learn at the position. So there's going to be a learning curve, but you watch him on tape and he has everything that you want from a dynamic receiving tight end and can block better than he gets credit for. So those are some of the main things that I really like about him. If he can, overcome some of the injury stuff, I think Green Bay got a really, really good player. Nicholas, appreciate the chat. This year is more about Jordan Love's development rather than filling a need at safety. We can fix that next year when our window opens, right? Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And, safety and, even tight end didn't go for much money this year. Running back doesn't go for much money. So there's certain positions that you can usually find guys in free agency and they can come in and help you. And safety is usually one of them. But once the window is open, if Jordan is good and your young talent develops and all of a sudden you're like, wow, we all of a sudden have a really good team, and you hopefully have become financially responsible by getting Aaron's contract off of your books and stop borrowing money from the future, maybe in the next year or two that you've kind of been doing. If all of a sudden you can do some of that stuff and kind of get, again, fiscally responsible, your young guys come up together at the same time, all of a sudden you start looking a few years down the road and you're like, wow, we've got a really talented nucleus. Hopefully you've got Jordan Love as a good quarterback. And all of a sudden you've got a bunch of money to spend. Now is when you evaluate needs. And now is when you go out and find those players that can hopefully get you over the top and fill some of those holes that you ultimately have on the roster. All right. H.E. Soder, thanks so much. Reed and Wooden were outside the normal Packer measurables for size. New trend, or were those players just so good that the Packers could not pass? Listen, Green Bay has their measurables and their thresholds that they really, really, really like, but it's not the be all end all. As Brian will tell you, and as their scouts said over the weekend, the tape is the tape. And it always is going to start with the tape and what they can bring as a pure football player. Because as I mentioned, like measurables are one thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a good football player. If you look analytically at the best players and where the RAS normally is and their athleticism normally is, it's usually 50th percentile athletes are better. And it's usually even better chance if you're 70th, 80th, 90th percentile athletes. Not always the case, but it plays out that way a lot more often than not. But every year there's going to be players that are just really great players that don't necessarily hit a threshold or two. And that's okay. You can find really good players that way. And unfortunately, some of the times that Green Bay has gone off of their thresholds, Amari Rodgers and Jay Sternberger come to mind. It hasn't turned out very well, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the worst thing that you could do is just be like, all right, we're going to take every, 79th percentile athlete and below and just throw them out. And we're not going to take those guys. Like, you don't want to eliminate anyone. You want to keep everyone available as options. And if you see somebody that you think can be a little bit of an outlier and be a really talented player, then you go out and get them. And I think both of these players are going to be, have the opportunity to be really good players. And I think sometimes too, if you have something that helps you overcome maybe a deficiency, like we'll talk Jaden Reed here for a second, like a 4.45 40 is going to help him, right? He still has something that he can lean on as far as explosiveness and speed. And as everyone says, and I agree with, he looks faster on tape than even the 4.45 40 testing. So some guys just don't test well in that sort of stuff. And that's okay. You can still be a really good football player. All right, let's see. What do we got here? Ihab Assad, do you think the 7th round safety has a real chance of starting this year? Listen, at this point, you can put the 5 safeties in a brown paper bag and you can pick out 2 names, and it could be Rudy Ford and Tavarius Moore. It could be Darnell Savage and it could be Anthony Johnson. It could be Ennis Gaines and, Tavarius Moore, whatever. And any combination at this point seems just about as good as any other combination. I don't have a lot of faith in any of the 5 at this point. Maybe Anthony Johnson will be really good. We'll see. But it's just going to see what they ultimately end up. I like Ennis Gaines personally. I thought Rudy Ford had a nice year a season ago. We'll see what Tavarius Moore brings to the table. I've seen a season in 2020 where Darnell Savage played awesome. Maybe 2020 Darnell Savage shows up this year. Maybe Anthony Johnson's great. Who knows? But right now, I don't have a ton of confidence in any of those safeties, and it's just going to be who ultimately wins the job in training camp. And yeah, I would put Anthony Johnson with pretty much any of those other ones at this point. All right, let's see here. Guys, quit fighting in the chat. Be nice to each other. It's draft day. Get along. Appreciate all the nice comments in chat. So Musgrave is a raw talent who didn't show his full potential in college. I agree with you, Zion. And I think, one of the things, the big red flag is I think he had 2 touchdowns in college. I joked about this, I think, on a couple different episodes. Luke Musgrave should have accidentally scored like 12 touchdowns in college, like just by pure accident, like just wrong place at the wrong time. Like, oh, the ball's there. I've got 12 touchdowns. Like, he's amazing size. He's a great athlete. He's a red zone weapon. And yes, some of the productivity stuff has not been there in college. And of course, those are things that you have to weigh out. And at the end of the day, you're watching the tape and you're looking at the athleticism and you watch them in person and you work them out and you go through everything and you just see this amazing, talented football player that there just aren't many of in the NFL, in Earth, on the planet Earth. There's just not many guys that are built and moved the way that Luke Musgrave moves. And at some point you just say, you know what? We think we can develop that. And we think we can take, that crappy stat line that he had in 4 years in college. We think he could finish with that in like the first half of his first NFL career. His first NFL season, excuse me. So yeah, there's a ton of upside there. And I don't think he got to show his true potential in college either. Some of the injuries this past year affected that as well. So that's all going to play a part in that, but he is a super talented football player. Now it's up to Green Bay to get the most out of it. Is this a 2025 window draft? I don't think there's a date in mind, Ben. And I think whoever it was earlier who brought up the New York Giants as a point, like you never know. And all of a sudden your team is going to play well. My favorite Packer team of all time, I know it didn't end the way that anyone wanted it to, and I know they still had Brett Favre at quarterback at the time, but was the one that ended the NFC Championship game with the pick to Corey Webster and the freezing cold and Tom Coughlin's stupid red face. That was my favorite season ever. If you go back and like go into the preseason that year, like the Packers were not expected to be a competitive team that year. People were thinking like maybe like an 8-8 team at best. Like they didn't really have a running back going into the season. And all of a sudden you end up with this, 13-3 team. And one of their only losses in the regular season was in Chicago in like a monsoon. And the only thing you could do was run the football. And it was just a stupid game. It didn't even matter. And, you go into the playoffs, they go down 14-0 to the Seahawks, and they, all of a sudden just storm back, and you've got Favre throwing snowballs around and everything like that. Like that was like the greatest season. It just unfortunately ended with the awful NFC Championship game, the way that Green Bay Packers seasons usually end, in heartbreak, in a new heartbreaking fashion every year. But that season was awesome because you just didn't know what you were going to expect going in that year. And all of a sudden you had this amazing team. That can happen. And the same thing is like all of a sudden, 2024, 2025 comes along and you've got a different team than you were expecting. A couple guys pick up later and you're great. But the 2023 draft was about accumulating as much young talent as possible and getting that talent in the door. And that's why need didn't play a part. Oh, you need a safety. All right, you can figure that out later. And you don't take a safety to check a box and just grab a safety, right? You're not going all in and doing everything you can to acquire players to win a Super Bowl this year. You're not a safety away from a Super Bowl. Let's put it that way. Like you're going to try to get as many talented players for this roster as you can possibly get. And when you're back to trying to compete for a Super Bowl, you'll fill in those gaps here and there with some free agents and some things that you need to do to ultimately try to get you over the top. This year's not this year, and you're just trying to get as much talent as possible. And as a GM, you're trying to make incremental increases to the roster. Can we get better, obviously in the draft than we were prior to the draft? Can we get better in undrafted free agency than where we were prior to undrafted free agency? Is there a street free agent that we can sign a couple of weeks from now that's going to make us before we sign that street free agent? And then just is there a guy that got waived in week 7 that we can claim and make our team better? Is there a guy that is there another, Alan Lazard that we can sign off a practice squad that can make our team better? It's just small incremental increases until you got that team that's ready to compete. And all of a sudden you've got a stacked roster that's ready to compete at the highest of levels. That's what Green Bay is trying to do right now. All right. Thanks so much, Kenneth. Wicks will either be one of the greatest day 3 picks of all time, or he'll get cut faster than Amari Rodgers and Jamon Moore. There is a little bit of Jamon Moore there. You saw the decrease in production this past year. There were some notes that maybe he had a little bit of tough time learning a system. Matt LaFleur's system is known to be very hard to learn for wide receivers. So there is, he had some concentration drops as well. Those are some very Jamon Moore traits. Jamon Moore also a great athlete, and you watch Jamon Moore's highlights and you are pretty set in your ways that he is going to be a fantastic wide receiver, but there's a lot more that goes into it. That the mind goes into it, the body goes into it, all of it. It takes everything. So I agree with you. I think this is a high risk, high reward play, and exactly what you should be doing on day 3 of the draft. You should be trying to find these players that have a tremendous amount of talent and flip a coin. And you're exactly right. If he turns out and he's motivated and he looks like he did in 2021, you may have gotten one of the best day 3 picks in the entire draft. If he's not, all right, he's a 5th round pick, not a big deal. Move on, and you can live to see another day. And you got 2 other wide receivers in the draft, and you hope that those 2 were the right ones. And sometimes they got a 2nd, a 5th, and a 7th round wide receiver, right? They took Jamon, MVS, and EQ, and MVS was the 5th round one, and he ended up being the best of the 3. And when they drafted 3 corners, Antoine Edwards, Fred Vinson, and Mike McKenzie, 1st, 2nd, 3rd round, the 3rd round pick ended up being the best one of the 3. Sometimes you just don't know. And that's the bizarre craziness of the NFL. Maybe Dubose is the next 7th round Donald Driver. Maybe Jaden is the next Greg Jennings in the 2nd round. Who knows? But you just hope for the best, and you take talented players. You're not going to get all of them right, but you like the upside, and you hope, like I said, you kind of hope for the best and hope you can develop them. Shane, super nice of you. Really appreciate that. That's super nice. Next time, ask a question, man. Happy to answer anything for you. Oh, Shane did. Shane came right back, man. Thanks so much. Thanks for all the hard work. What did you think of the running back from CMU? Fire up. I want to take a lot more of a look at Lou Nichols. And as I mentioned, over the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be doing super deep dives. I'm going to be watching all 22 on as much tape as I can possibly get my hands on. I've got off all day tomorrow. I've got the rest of the night tonight. I've got off all day Monday. I am going to be in my basement and my eyes. When you see the Pack a Day podcast on like Monday morning and Tuesday morning, I'm going to look like I'm probably a complete wreck because I'm going to basically just be watching as much tape as I possibly can over the next couple days and nonstop. So I've actually got a huge chunk of Lucas Van Ness's tape already done. Got a little bit more to dig in there. I've got a ton of notes taken. So super excited to fire up that deep dive for Monday. And then Tuesday we'll go Musgrave and write down the list from there. So definitely keep an eye out for those. And probably like 2 weeks from now, we'll get to Lou Nichols, and I promise I'll have a really fun breakdown. Actually, you can cut one of those out because I will not be doing a massive deep dive on Anders Carlson. That will be maybe a aside to the Carl Brooks or to the Carrington Valentine episodes, but I promise you I will not make anyone sit through a 30-minute deep dive on Anders Carlson, because if you want that, then you need to get probably some help, because even I don't want that at this point. So you're not getting an Anders Carlson deep dive. If somebody tips $100 or more asking for an Anders Carlson deep dive, I will do a 30-minute, not 30-minute. I will do as much of an Anders Carlson deep dive as I possibly can. If that's what you really, really want, you sicko. But nobody's getting that. But yes, I will come back and do a Lou Nichols deep dive, of course, in the next coming weeks. And yes, whoever pointed it out, we did get Amon Green because of Fredson. So that was, I said at the time that would end up being that was one of my first good hot takes. I said that would end up being one of the best trades in Packers history. It was. Can't say it quite lived up to the Brett Favre trade, but was certainly up there in trades, to say the least. Let's see here. You guys got me. I am pretending to be a Packers fan on a Packers YouTube channel, unless you're talking about somebody else. But that 365-day-a-year podcast I put together, it's all a sham. I just doing it for kicks at this point. And in like 10 years, I'm just going to reveal myself as a hidden Chicago Bears fan all along. Gotcha. Oh, are there a bunch of Bears fans in the chats? Welcome. We would love to have you have a real, analytical mind to break down a team. It's great that you guys will get to see what that's like, to have a real normal conversation about a team. So welcome one, welcome all. Tell your friends to join. The more the merrier. You guys are always welcome. Just, try not to, stink up the chat too much. All right, fair enough, Lee Bruce. What do we got here? Anyone else have any good questions? We're at about 57 minutes so far. Like I said, you guys want to keep going? I'll keep going a little bit longer yet. All right. A nuclear family. Thanks so much, man. Whose media style do you prefer, Ted Thompson or Goody? Are you concerned that Goody tips picks a little bit by saying how much he loved the tight ends, loved the draft? No, I'm not concerned. I think we're in a little bit more of a modern day where you can be a little bit more forthright and while also kind of keeping it secret. Also, GMs lie a lot. So I think Goody also knows like there's going to be times where he's like, yeah, we really want to get a running back tomorrow, and they have no interest in getting a running back. And sometimes you might say, yeah, we would really like to get a tight end tomorrow. And they go and get 2 tight ends. And I also think that he knows that just because he says something like that, I don't think any GM is actually taking action. Here's the other thing, right? By him saying, he wants to go out and get tight ends, literally any other GM can look at the Packers depth chart and be like, yeah, if we want a tight end that we really like, we probably need to chump the Packers because they don't have any and they're probably going to take a lot of tight ends. So I don't think he gives away anything, quite honestly. And I like both of their styles, quite honestly. I think Matt's I think some of Matt's stuff is becoming a little bit sort of like, kind of repetitive at times. And that works really, really well when you're 13-4, 13-3, and works a little bit worse when you're not. But I really like Matt as a coach. I think he's a really good coach. And, like I said, there's things that Goody and I don't always see eye to eye on. Not that that means anything. The guy is going to forget more about football than I'll ever know. But, I think he does a really good job, and I like how both of them, lead their press conferences. And as far as Ted, you asked Goody or Ted. Sorry, I was thinking Goody or Matt. But thankfully I was not there I don't know if thankfully is the right word, but Ted was hard to get stuff out of. So as somebody who can attend the press conferences, I'll take Goody every day. Bradley says, shouldn't we have picked an offensive lineman? Glad you asked this question. I think this is a fun question. The only reason I say maybe / yes is because it's kind of Green Bay's superpower. They are sort of an offensive line factory, and they have the formula for how to find and develop really great offensive linemen. And they are just machines at taking highly athletic tackles, moving them inside and having them be great guards. They are masters at finding offensive linemen on day 3 of the draft, from your Josh Sittons to your TJ Langs to your David Bakhtiaris to Zach Tom this past season, like Corey Lindsley, JC Treader. We could go on and on, from Mark Tauscher to all of it. Like the day 3 offensive linemen that they've been able to develop over their time is insane. They know the formula, and they're, like I said, they've got some sort of black magic witchcraft. As bad as they are in doing anything in the 3rd round, they are amazing at everything offensive linemen on day 3. And you know they're really bad in the 3rd round, because even when they take an offensive lineman in the 3rd round, which they're masters at, like a Sean Ryan, they can't even get that right. But neither here nor there. But yes, they're so good at drafting offensive linemen that I do think that I would have liked to have seen it, just because, like I said, they're so great at it. That being said, you kind of look at the roster right now, right? As far as starters go, David's your left tackle, Elton's your left guard, John Runyon Jr. is your right guard. And then you've got probably 3 players for 2 spots. You've probably got Myers at center and Yash at right tackle, with Zach Tom pushing both of those guys. Either Zach we'll see. It'll be really interesting to me to see where Zach starts the offseason. If he's taking snaps at center, Josh better look out. Like he's got real competition. If Zach's taking snaps at right tackle, then Yash has got real competition, right? So we're going to see where they line up Zach, and he's probably going to play a little bit all over the place. But they kind of got 6 starters that they have at least as options going into the season. You've still got Royce Newman, who I know everyone's not super pumped about, but is still a player that started in this league and is a 8th, 9th offensive lineman if you really need him to be. And then you've got a lot of guys that they are sort of developing, right? That are the guys that you would kind of take on day 3 of the draft. Sean Ryan, we'll still wait and see. He had a lot of potential coming out of UCLA. You watch his tape, and it was really, really great. He thought that he might be able to play tackle or guard. Didn't work out a season ago, but hopefully he comes back extra motivated this season, especially after a suspension a season ago. Hopefully that was a wake-up call for him. But then you've got Rasheed Walker. You've got Luke Tenuta, who they picked up, who, by the way, Tenuta was ahead of Rasheed Walker and Caleb Jones by the end of last year. You've got Caleb Jones. Like, you've got some of those developmental players already on your roster. You still got Jake Hansen, who started in this league. I'm not saying that a lot of those are necessarily great options. I don't think anyone's clamoring for Jake Hansen or Royce Newman to be starting on the offensive line again anytime soon, but they sort of have your usual 5 to 6 starters, 2 to 3 guys who've got some experience starting in the offensive line, and then 4 or 5 guys that you're hoping to develop. And they're going to go out and get some guys in undrafted free agency as well. So I can understand why they didn't. But like I said, the only reason why I'm like, yeah, I kind of wish they would have is because it's kind of what they're really good at. All right, Jeff convinced me that this draft wasn't perfect for the Packers right now. Andy, I've got a good feeling about it and need to be talked down. Well, Jeff, I think the thing that we always get caught up in is, we can always talk ourselves into a draft. I will say I love this draft. I love the picks. I'm super excited about it. If you want to be brought back down to life, remember that if you want to be the best scout in the world, you can be better than anyone that's on TV. You can be better than any scout that's in any team right now. Just say that every draft pick isn't going to be good, because you're going to have like a 80% hit rate as a scout. You'll hit on 80. You'll be right 80% of the time. This guy's not going to be good. This guy's not going to be good. Because most of these guys don't end up turning out, if we're being real. Like I said, if you get 3 or 4 guys from a draft class that can end up really helping you, and hopefully 2 of those as starters, one of them as a top end starter, you've done your job as a GM in a draft. So I know we always get excited. I cannot wait to break down the tape and bring you the deep dives. But the truth of the matter is like 7 of these guys are going to be out of the league in like 3 or 4 years. And another 1 or 2 are going to probably be disappointments. And then you're hoping that 3 of these guys are going to be long-term, really good Green Bay Packers, including 1 or 2 of them at a Pro Bowl type level. That's what you're hoping for. So, pick your name on the list, and hopefully it's not Anders Carlson is the best one as an all-pro kicker. It'd be nice to have an all-pro kicker, but hopefully that's not the one that hits as an all-pro, right? So time will tell. It's a really fun draft class. It makes it a lot more fun and exciting to talk about when you can see the vision that Goody had, when you can see that they got some really great young players. But we're going to have to take it one step at a time, just like the players are, and to see what they can ultimately become in Green Bay. Kevin, you think Tom will compete with Myers for the starting center spot? I think it's very possible. I really, really do. I think Josh has not been good. He was not very good last year at all. He was okay as a rookie, ups and downs that you're willing to forgive a little bit more because they're a rookie. And then in the second year when they're doing the same things and even kind of worse, you're like, that's not good. You should probably be better and not worse in year 2. And I'm really interested to see how he comes in and attacks year 3. Some of these players, maybe they had an injury that just never really got announced or we didn't really know about. Some nagging thing that just doesn't allow them to play at the level that they're capable of. Maybe Josh had something like that. We don't know. He certainly came back from an injury from the end of year 1. So maybe it was something like that. I know Aaron yelled at Josh quite a bit. There was some things that he didn't like that Josh did. And maybe without a super high intense quarterback playing right behind him, maybe Josh will be able to play a little bit more clear. I'm not saying Aaron did anything wrong, but maybe that'll just allow him to go out and play. Personally, because of some of that, I kind of want him at guard and just be like, don't think as much anymore. You don't have to make the calls. You don't have to do all of the stuff. Like let Elton do that or let Zach do that or let somebody else. And let's see if he can play really well at guard because he's got some really high-end talent, which is why they took him in the second round. But he hasn't played well. And if you don't play well, then there should be competition. And with Zach Tom, Goody said that he thought Zach Tom coming out of college that his best position was going to be center. So it would not shock me one bit if I saw Zach Tom line up at center taking snaps. It doesn't mean that he's going to be with the first team, but wouldn't shock me if we started seeing Zach take snaps at center early and get in that conversation for potentially starting at center. And by the way, if that did happen, if let's just say you went Bach, Jenkins, and then Tom at center, Yash at right tackle, I want to see Josh and John Runyon Jr. I want to see those two fight out at right guard then. Let's see, because I really like John Runyon Jr. I think he's been way better than Myers has, but you also see some dips in consistency at times from John Runyon Jr. And I just want to see a little bit of pressure underneath him because I want to see him playing at the level I think he can play at. I think John Runyon Jr. can potentially play at a Pro Bowl level if he put everything together. And instead it's just kind of plateaued as he's good. If he's your number 5 offensive lineman, you're okay. I want to see him play at a higher level because I think he's capable of it. So maybe some competition would do the trick. Lee, I don't know, again, what this is in regards to. Probably not anything that I said, but I just want to shout out that I 1,000,000% agree. He has done an absolutely unbelievable job. The Eagles have as a whole. That team is beyond stacked. And you look at how they attack their roster, it is a beautiful thing to watch. They are working and operating at a completely different level than a lot of the GMs and teams in the league right now. All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, I might jump into some Carl Brooks tape and some of the guys in just a second here. Undrafted free agency has already started, Lance. There's already a multitude of guys announced. I haven't reached, obviously I've been chatting with you guys for a little over an hour here, but I know some guys that are already retweeted. A North Carolina State punter, Shane McDonough, no relation to Sean McDonough, I'm assuming. They've got a undrafted free agent linebacker, 6'1", 232, Jimmy Phillips Jr., offensive tackle, Kadeem Telford, who they had in for a visit. Let's see, Florida State tight end, Cameron McDonald, Benny Sapp, I'm not sure position or school, Alabama Birmingham offensive tackle, Kadeem Telford, all right. Malik Heath, a priority free agent, got a $9,000 signing bonus. Illinois State defensive lineman, Jason Luan. So those are some of the ones that I was able to see prior to coming on, and I'm sure there's probably been a few more announced since I started chatting with you guys. All right. Tundra Talk, thanks so much. Could DeGuara be in danger of being cut before the season? Tight end room as talent above him now, or does the H-back role save him? What are your expectations for Love in the year 2 guys? As far as DeGuara goes, I do not see him being in much danger of being released. If he comes out and just sucks, he's not guaranteed a spot, he's going to have to earn it in camp at some capacity, right? But if you watch Jordan Jordan, when he's been in, and even in preseason and those sort of things, he has a little bit of a connection with DeGuara. Those two seem to kind of be on the same wavelength. Remember when he came in Detroit 2 seasons ago in that last game, he hit DeGuara over the middle. DeGuara took it for like a 70-yard touchdown and raced away from everyone. I don't think Rodgers liked DeGuara, and I'm not saying it's like a person or anything. I don't think he wanted him in the game. He wanted Mercedes in the game. He wanted Tunyon in the game. He wanted his veteran tight ends in the game. He didn't want DeGuara in there too often. And when he was in there, I don't think he was too excited to look his way too often. So I think we're going to see a little bit of a different Josiah DeGuara role with Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love likes that connection a little bit more. Those two guys as like the backup quarterback and the backup tight end work together a lot more on scout team together. So they've kind of, I think, developed a little bit of a chemistry. So I think we're going to see a little bit more DeGuara. And I don't think you want to go into your season with, like, let's say DeGuara gets cut, right? And it's not to say that they don't add another player here or there. I don't think you want to just go in with 2 rookies and Tyler Davis at this point. So I would expect that DeGuara's on the team. My expectations for Love in the year 2 guys, I think that's what makes the season super, super fun, is that we just don't know. Is Love bad? Is he good? Is he average? Is he great? I don't think the Packers know. I don't know anyone can know until we actually see him out on the field. And my expectations, I want to see a big jump from the first round picks a season ago. Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker, Georgia defenders, extremely talented athletes. I want to see those guys put it together and take a very big jump in year 2, because those guys have everything they need to make a huge difference on this defense. They didn't really do it a season ago. Quay Walker's biggest play was arguably when he pushed a trainer from the other team a season ago. It just needs to be better. When Wyatt got on the field, I liked the flashes that he showed. He played like 100, 200 snaps maybe at most. Like, those guys got to get on the field and they need to make a much bigger impact. Appreciate the chat there, Thunder Talk. Seems like the Eagles follow a media consensus on picks and are great. How do you feel a media-driven draft consensus board team would do in the league? I definitely don't think that they follow a media-driven board. I guarantee you that is a team that very much keeps its own board and evaluates their own players. But I do think, there are certain teams that allow the board to fall to them and strike when the iron is hot. I think the Ravens and the Eagles are 2 fantastic examples of that, where they're not like, maybe they didn't see Jalen Carter being there, or like didn't have him targeted or whatever. But you know what? Jalen Carter just fell to them and they took him. And I think they did really want Jalen Carter. Don't get me wrong. But I think the Kyle Hamilton last year for the Ravens, like, I don't think they were expecting him to fall. I don't think they were expecting Tyler Linderbaum to fall. They did. They made sure that those guys didn't fall anymore and they took them off the board. So I think those are teams that aren't afraid to, regardless of what their plan of attack was going into the draft, and like, we're not going to look this gift horse in the mouth. We're going to take both of those guys and stop their fall and make sure that, just develop them. And like I said, make sure that they get those talented players before anyone else can. Andy, would you have taken Duggan over Clifford? I'm so curious to see your opinion. Elbow cough, face blue smiling. All right, fair enough. I don't have a strong take on Duggan over Clifford, honestly. Sean Clifford isn't going to probably do a whole lot to excite a lot of people. Like I said, I opened with this as well, but when you're taking a quarterback in the 5th round, you are very much hoping that you can latch onto something that you really like about that player. And Green Bay found something that they like. Maybe it was his leadership, some of his intangibles, his toughness, his productivity at Penn State. Maybe it was his, athleticism, 4.6 40. There's some things to really like with Clifford. You just, you watch his tape and it's not super exciting or sexy and leaves a lot to be desired sometimes. So is he a finished product at quarterback? No, but that doesn't mean that he still can't have a successful career and maybe come in and be a really good backup for Green Bay. So I didn't watch a ton of Duggan, to be honest, so I can't really comment on it too much. But again, if we get to the end of this draft and the biggest issue is that, we wish they would have taken a different 5th round quarterback, I said it's probably a pretty good thing for the Packers. All right. Anything else here? Why do you think Reed over Josh Downs? I don't know. I didn't think Josh Downs was probably going to be someone on their board. Not that I necessarily thought Reed was going to be someone on their board. I think the thing with Reed that probably excited them was his contested catch ability for his size. I think if you're going to be that size, I think you really want to be able to go up and still make some of those contested catches, which Reed has shown that he can do. I'd have to look back at Downs. I think Downs is more of just a slot guy, if I remember correctly. But Reed had the ability to play outside and in the slot and have a little bit more of that maneuverability around. He's got the punt return experience. I think Reed, I know I had Jacob Morley on the other day, and when you say like, there's certain things that with Green Bay, they like certain traits and you like them to be there and like they go to the top of their list. Wicks and Dubose were both of those players. Like they hit everything that Green Bay looks for. But there's also wide receivers that if you look at the bottom end of their traits and what Green Bay looks for, they don't eliminate themselves from the conversation. And I don't think Josh Downs probably eliminated himself on conversations from some of his metrics. Reed did not. He still hit at least the minimum thresholds for everything. Didn't hit their peak thresholds that they like, but he didn't eliminate himself by not hitting at least some of the minimum thresholds. So I think that's probably some of the reasons why Reed over Downs. All right. Do you have a concern with the two new tight ends being injured last year? I mentioned this. Thanks again for the chat, Jill. What I said in Twitter yesterday, I'll sort of say again today. The Green Bay Packers medical staff and GM and how he trusts his medical staff is overly cautious with those decisions. And they will take players off their board if they think they have legitimate injury concerns. So if they cleared both of those players to be, day 2 players, round 2, round 3, that means that they had a very high level of confidence that those injuries are not going to be long-term debilitating injuries that are going to cause concern for the foreseeable future. It's not to say that, could maybe one of those guys miss some time in OTAs, mini camps. We'll see. I don't know. Those will be things that we have to keep an eye on. But if Green Bay's medical staff cleared them and the GM was willing to take them, I feel comfortable personally that they're probably not too much of an issue at this point. Really appreciate your draft takes this past weekend, Andy. Thank you. Really appreciate that, George Costanza. Hopefully this is the summer of George and the summer and fall and winter of the Packers. All right, guys, I'm going to probably wind down here. Thanks so much, Ryan. Really appreciate this. Given that we now have 5 guys in the defensive tackle room, how reliant are we going to be on Devontae Wyatt this season? How do you think he won't grow into that role? I don't think they want to be necessarily reliant on any of those guys, but I think they want those guys to step up and earn the job. But I can pretty much guarantee you that after Kenny Clark, TJ Slayton and Devontae Wyatt are going to be the guys that they're entrusting with those roles. And then the 2 guys, that they get on day 3 of the draft, they're going to hope can fill some of those spots and rotational minutes that you're losing with the Jerron Reeds of the world and with the Dean Lowrys of the world being gone. We'll see if Jonathan Ford, the defensive tackle, 7th round pick a season ago, can get his name in the conversation as well. They still have Chris Slayton as well. So they've got a really nice rotation at potential at defensive line. And now it's just about seeing who ultimately, makes the most of it and can get the most snaps out of it. Kevin, I'm glad you brought this up. I don't know that I'm willing to go that far with Jayden Reed, but somebody that's smarter than me at scouting prospects, Ben Fennell, did go that far. He had his comp down as Christian Kirk. So if you want an upside play for Jayden Reed, you're definitely hoping that it hits something like Christian Kirk hit, especially the way he played last year in Jacksonville. Really appreciate that, Gary. Gary, I see you all the time on Twitter and the chats, etc. So really appreciate your support as well. All right, guys, I think I'm probably going to wind things down. My voice is starting to go, getting hoarse. And I think I'm going to start winding things down. But just want to say thank you one more time. I've seen multiple of you guys in all 3 of the chats this weekend. It's been a lot of fun, and it's certainly not going to stop anytime soon. I'll leave this with you guys. I think I'm going to have a pretty major announcement coming up in the near future. So I haven't said anything to anyone yet. But you guys will be the very first to know. At least I'll give a whisper of it here. I've got a pretty amazing announcement coming up in the next couple of months here. So something to whet your appetite a little bit. But I think you guys will hopefully enjoy it and appreciate it. So something to leave you guys with. Really appreciate all the support over the weekend. Like I said, I absolutely love doing this. The grind is real, but it's super, super fun. I'm about to enter into a 3-day foray of watching a bunch of tape. I'll have a brand new episode out for you guys on the YouTube channel and over on the Pack-A-Day YouTube or audio channel as well for you guys bright and early tomorrow morning, 5 a.m. So make sure to check that out as well anytime tomorrow, obviously. new episode 365 days a year. The deep dives will start on Monday, so keep an eye out for those. Those are can't miss. I spend a ton of time. I know we all want the instant gratification. I know we want the instant grades and the instant analysis. I give as much as I can when it first comes out, but I'm going to spend a ton of time breaking down the film and giving you guys a huge scouting report on these players and breaking them down, watching as much film as I possibly can. So keep an eye out for those. Follow the channel. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I will see you guys soon, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.